It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hey friends, this is Andy. This episode of Accelerate is brought to you by Kitedesk. Kitedesk is the all-in-one sales development platform that lets you manage all of your sales development activities, such as email, direct dial phone calls, and your daily to-dos, all in one place to open up conversations, book more qualified meetings, and really create predictable pipeline.
Kitedesk Flow and Kitedesk Find allows us to find exactly the right people in the industries we're looking for, in the roles that we're looking for.
That's Kitedesk customer Michael Orphis. Michael is head of sales at Stratified. In addition to the all-in-one management of his sales development team's days, Kitedesk helps him with another big part of his job.
We have the ability with Kitedesk to do what we call targeted campaigns. Our conversion rate from what we were doing in the past to what we're doing now has been really massive.
So you don't have to take tons of time to research, prospect, then blast large lists of people that never turn into sales opportunities.
We're seeing higher clicks, we're seeing higher open rates, and without question, we've seen a massive increase in pipeline generation.
So, to learn more about Kitedesk, schedule a free demo, and learn how to create predictable pipeline at your sales organization, go to kitedesk.com/accelerate. That's KITEDESK.com/accelerate. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. Joining me on the show today is Manny Medina. Manny is the CEO of Outreach.io, which is a sales development and sales communication platform. Manny, welcome to Accelerate.
Happy to be here, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining me. So take a minute, introduce yourself, your background. How'd you get your start in sales?
Well, I'm Manny Medina. I started my career as a software developer. And my first job was with a company. My first job out of college was with a company called Bell Atlantic, which is now part of Verizon Communications. Mm-hmm. After the merge with NYNEX back in the 90s. Actually, before that, it was back in the 90s. My career sort of evolved in the technical track. I was very early at Amazon Web Services, and then I moved to Microsoft, where I joined the Windows Phone team. And in the Windows Phone team, I joined the sales team doing distribution deals for Windows Phone in Latin America. So selling the phone to operators. Mm-hmm. And that sort of got me started in the amazing world of sales. And then I started a company as well soon after that. And I was the main sales guy for the company. That company was called Group Talent. And that's where we sort of got the idea for outreach. And after a couple of years slugging it out in Group Talent, we built a tool internally that customers that sort of allow us to really scale out a very small sales team to reach out to many customers and sort of get a big pipeline going. And when we got a hold of customers and they would ask us, you're very persistent, you're very personalized, how do you do it? We told them what we build internally, and people wanted to buy the tool, not the service.
Right.
So eventually came out and shut down Group Talent and build that outreach, which was the operations of Group Talent, and sold that instead.
Huh, and interesting.
Well, that's what got us here.
Interesting. So maybe taking a step back and before I dive into outreach a little bit, so in your mind, what are you seeing today as sort of the biggest challenge facing sales?
There's a few. The main one that we see facing sales is a couple of things. So the declining amount that a sales rep spends actually doing sales is what we see as the biggest challenge facing sales.
Declining amount of time they spend.
Exactly. The declining amount of time that a sales rep spends doing, doing actual sales activities. And it's interestingly enough, the culprit is sort of, it's a bit of a moving target. So one is, when the CRM was created, it was a great tool for you to record what happens in your sales cycle. But as sort of the reporting and the sort of the measuring got more, got fancier and got more complex, the reporting requirements just continued to go up, and the amount of time that a rep has spent with administrative tasks just grew very rapidly. And on top of that, the sales never got enough love from a product or technology side of the house. So, what they were started doing is to start layering tools on top of the tools to try to solve this problem, but the problem just got worse. So they now, fast forward to today, in which you have a sales rep that has to spend a lot of time entering activities and entering data into the CRM, while at the same time they have a number of tools that they have to, sort of go in and out of just to do their day-to-day job. And this panoply of tools plus CRM is just creating a lot of friction for the sales rep to just navigate quickly through the admin task and get back to sales.
So you're saying the sales stack is too big?
So the sales stack is getting a little too fragmented. I don't know about size, but it's definitely, getting a lot of different tools doing, single action activities that are not really helping the sales rep become more efficient, but rather just introducing more complexity and chaos into their process.
Right. So, the reason I'm saying big is, based on your description, it sounds like there's opportunity for consolidation.
There's definitely opportunity for consolidation. There's opportunity for rethinking about the sales process and introducing tools that sort of automate a lot more of what the rep is doing and sort of put him back on the phone and put him back on being personal and being human.
So where do you think those opportunities are to automate that exist today that haven't been automated?
So if you follow the funnel, there's a number of things that you can. The bigger pieces are around how do you get the rep to sort of sync their data into CRM without having the rep do it, right? So that's one of the holy grails that many companies are sort of chasing. So the CRM syncing, how do you do it in a smart way so that the rep spends the least amount of time on CRM and spends more time doing research or talking to the customer. The second piece is how do you go ahead?
Well, I was going to say, which ostensibly Outreach.io helps.
Right. That's one of the main, our core value props. Mm-hmm. And the second one, which is more interesting, and this is sort of where we're going with our intelligence releases, how do you bring the right information to the rep real time so that the rep has all the bits and pieces of information in front of them when he needs it or she needs it, so they can make a quick decision. So if I'm doing research on you, I have to go in through a handful of websites plus whatever information I'm buying from third-party vendors to sort of get a good feel for who is Andy Paul and how am I what am I going to say when I call you, or what am I going to type in that email. Mm-hmm. So the ability to sort of bring that information in and sort of give you one window pane of sort of like a dossier on you that I can use and act on. Right. It's the other piece where reps are spending disproportionately amount of time in doing research and sort of going around and trying to find information. And the third piece is around the communication workflow and what can you automate. And there is sort of very tactical small things in it, but that are technologically advanced. For instance, the ability to drop a voicemail where you're calling somebody else. If I'm trying to get a hold of you and you don't respond, you want to move on to the next activity, and you sort of drop the voicemail and move on. Just because what you're going to say in that voicemail is relatively the same every time you get a voicemail. The other one is how much automation and follow up can you use in a particular sequence of steps, and this is sort of where I have to jump on the soapbox and sort of really talk about that the sales process is that, right? It's a process that needs to be measured, it needs to be optimized for what you're trying to get done. And it's not about, whether I'm making the call or I'm sending the email or whether I'm personalized or I'm automated. It's really what is the value of your action based on the expected outcome, right? So if you are
the value for who? For you as a salesperson.
Exactly.
Right.
So the unit of measure that you have to trade is your time. And what are you going to do with that, next 5 minutes, next half hour? It's really what you're optimizing for. So whether I make a phone call, who are you going to call and what are you going to say? And if I'm going to place an email, how much time I'm going to spend in that email and what I'm going to say in it. And that's really what you need to figure out, where do you use your personalization versus automation?
Well, which plays to the other half of the equation, though, which is that same bargain and equation exists on the other side, which is what's the value the customer is going to get in return for investing their time to listen to that voicemail or take that phone call or to read that email. That's
absolutely right. And that's exactly a trade-off, right? So if you're just educating a customer, is your value best spent sending them an email or calling them or letting marketing automation get to them, or sending them a white paper and sort of being done with that. So the interesting thing is that because you only have signals. So from the customer perspective, what we have right now, which is a very interesting development, is that it used to be that the customer, in the days of marketing automation, right, the customer knew, the presumption was that the customer knew a lot about the product or the services they were about to buy before they bought. And, and they even got as far as say, sales reps are just order takers. Everything happens in marketing automation, who's really walking the customer down a path down a sales, a sort of a sales learning path, and it's really the rep is just closing. And I think that was one view of the world, and I think that view has been challenged. And now we are in sort of the opposite side of that, in which, as a seller, I know a lot about my customer before I call him. I know a lot about not only that person himself or herself, but I know a lot about that persona type, and I know a lot about that company and a lot about the industry before I ever pick up the phone or send that first email. So there is ample opportunity right now to be very personalized, to be very targeted, and to do enough research to make sure that when you send that email, you are almost dead on in terms of like what are the opportunities, or what are sort of the pains that you're going to be pitching against, and sort of it's turning this job from sort of taking all this activity to one in which you're spending a bit more time trying to figure out your customer, and sort of picking the right story to tell that customer at that time so you can get a reaction from them, and then sort of using that story to walk down the funnel. And that's sort of when automation comes in, right? So depending on the number of deals that you have, depending on your hypothesis and where the customer is in the buying journey, you're going to be using that particular type of language. And then the question is, depending on your ACV and the unit economics of what you're trying to do, whether that communication that you're going to do is going to be something that is going to be automated, semi-automated, or manual, right? Depending on where is that you want to spend your time and with whom and et cetera. Does that make sense?
Sure. But I mean, this is when you talk about, where you want to spend your time. I mean, that's also based, as you said earlier, though, it's really about not just where you want to spend your time, but also what the customer needs at that point in time.
Correct. But it depends on, so, from a process perspective, if you're, so you have to believe that if you're using an inside sales rep, that your ACV will justify the economics of the unit economics of your business justifies a rep, a rep reaching out, or a rep taking your inbound.
Yeah, just so people understand, ACV is average contract value, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So once you make that decision, then you have a number of options from then on, right? Like, at an ACV of 20,000, of course you can, kind of have an inside sales team, being very personalized. But at an ACV of 10,000 or less, then you really have to make the choices as to where you're gonna, what persona is your rep gonna be spending time with, and what persona is better educated via other means, so that the economics continue to work out for you. While respecting whatever and running the hypothesis or whatever about the recipient of those communications. Because I mean, one of the things that is interesting about sales as well is that sales is not more. It used to be. There's no such thing as one cold close anymore, especially in the B2B world, right? And there's no such thing as the one decision maker. What you have is sort of a political structure that you sort of need to navigate, even for very small companies. Even if you come into outreach, a year ago when there's only 40 people here, if you want us to sell something, there's still, I was eventually the check writer, but I will look to 3 or 4 people before I made that decision, right? So one of them is the person who's going to live with it, but the other one is other people who sort of are knowledgeable in the space. And I feel like that has changed across, across all B2B sales, especially, in that you need to understand who are the decision makers and influencers, and sort of use that kind of approach to really land the sale. I meaning you're going to have to talk to the end user, and there's a value prop for them. You're going to have to talk to the administrator, or manager, and there's a value prop for that person. And then you have to talk to the check writer or even the leader of that organization, and there's a different value prop for that person. And your job is to sort of work with marketing to figure out how do you group that into personas, and what is the approach that you take for each. You see what I mean? And what is that they want to hear, and where do you think they are in their buyer journey? So this is why sales has gotten more complex in that there is a lot more there's a lot more people in the decision cycle. However, there's also a lot more. You have a lot more technology in terms of what what you can test in terms of will an automated follow up get you there where you need to go, or you really need to personalize the hell out of this particular message and really really bring it home in a way that is very personal, because the time spent doing it has positive ROI on your end.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. As one is, and we separate conversations we could have about, is selling more complex? The decision making isn't more complex, because I haven't bought into that yet, because as someone whose career transcends both halves of let's say of the technological evolution.
Yeah,
it's not really different. I mean, despite what CEB says about, hey, 5.8 or 6.8 people now, at least with what I sold in the past, it was always the case that was it. There were always these multiple stakeholders, and you weren't just selling to one person. So I don't think that really matters as much as I think that what I heard you saying, though, I think is really sort of interesting, is that you can see the trend evolving, is that if you do have this complex sales environment, especially in the lower ACVs, 10,000 and under, then what you're saying is that companies increasingly are going to be sort of faced with this choice where, if they're using an inside sales model where, hey, below a certain ACV, you are, and that ACV is getting higher actually, is you are going to be almost purely automated in your sales process.
Well, and that's the part that I'm not. So there's two pieces, right? When you say purely automated, what you're implying is that there's an element of human behavior. There's an element of human interaction in that the human needs to understand. They need to make the choices of how do you cut the data and how do you cut the automation in such a way that when you're reaching to somebody with something that was ultimately automated, that message or that piece of information lands. Right. And the reason you need automation is two. One is, because of the obvious time saving. Because the other one is you need at least some kind of assistant to figure out, to continuously test your message and test your approach. You see what I mean? And this is why it's hard to argue, to get religious on this and really argue one side of the argument on another. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is triangulating. Right, you're triangulating your efficiency of your rep versus where the customer is at in terms of their buying cycle, in terms of what they need to actually understand more about your value prop before it jumps on the phone and really makes that connection and sort of brings it home. So, and the only way to do it is by sort of continuously testing your message, testing your approach, testing your persona classification, and really have a system that sort of helps you go down the path as you get smarter. You know what I mean? And this is, even when And that's really how you make a team successful. That's really when we see sort of high performers versus the low performers in an organization, is that they have put a lot of this thought up front, and they're continuously refining their hypotheses and their views as to what's going to work and what won't. You see what I mean? So the arguments as to who do you call, when do you call, and what time whether it's automated and whatever is it's only one of the many data points that you use in terms of what action are you going to make your sales team take based on the persona that you're reaching out to.
Mm-hmm. So what are you finding in terms of the challenges in that environment for reps to really engage with the prospects on the level that they need to build the relationship and the trust that's going to result in a sale? And this is sort of a refrain I'm hearing quite a bit from people I interview for the show, CEOs I talk to using inside sales, is they see that as sort of their challenge, right? Is how do we're getting better at, and we're being persistent, we're getting through the people, but then when we finally get the chance to have that person-to-person interaction, that's the weak part of the chain.
So I mean, you touch on so many points that I could take 50 different directions. But
choose one. We'll go with it.
Yeah. So first of all, okay. So let me write that down so I make sure I don't forget, because this alone is going to end up in the rest of this time talking. So there's two main points here that we need to tease out. So one is process, and how well the process is defined, and how well does a customer really understand their prospects and their customers. And the other one is how well trained are SDRs and AEs who are jumping on the phone and really having these conversations. And I mean, interestingly enough, we find gaps in both. In process-wise, most companies don't have a view of sort of a really detailed view on an understanding and hypothesis around their persona. meaning who are they reaching out to? What are the potential pain points that they're going to be selling against? And at the end of the day, what is the story that they need to weave into the narrative so that when that rep calls, he has a point of view that is just part of the longer story, right? I call you, I have a hypothesis around, if I'm selling you ERP, for instance, just as a matter of, argument, I'm calling you and there's two ways to do it, right? I can either give you an opportunity, challenge your current situation and say, hey, I bet you didn't know this, that this little ticking time bomb that is happening in your shop. And if you don't call me right now, there is millions of revenue you could be not making by not calling me or something along those lines, right? Sure. Or you could use the positive upside of saying, we can make your life a lot easier if you buy our stuff, give me a call.
Yeah. When you ask a question about something they should know about their business but don't, that's a compelling leave behind. Yes.
Right. So breaking it down as to, that's a fine general message, but there's the end users, there's the administrator, and then the VP of ops, for instance, who are all affected by this decision. So breaking it down and really getting granular as to, what is the messaging that is going to resonate for each persona? And that's how does persona best receive that message, right? So if you are, in your 50s and you live in the Midwest, you're very apt to pick up the phone. And that's in using a lot of phone calling, it's a very fine method of reaching out. But if you're if you're a millennial and you live in one of the coasts, I don't even remember last time you picked up the phone. And especially if you don't know where they're calling you from. So don't use the phone, use something else, use social, use email, use whatever. So the idea is that, you break down, so you have this matrix or like even, N space, cube in which you're really defining all the different attributes of the persona, meaning starting with a story, the problem, the method, and the communication vehicle to really sort of hone in as to, how you're going to make that approach. And once you make that approach, then you have to be able to sort of jump on the phone and continue the story that started with the first communication. And that's also where it breaks. It's like, where did I make that? Where was that point of interest? And how do I navigate that into a conversation? And at the end of the day, it's interesting that you said that, things haven't changed in sales. And I tend to agree that once you get on the phone, you're dealing with, just a straight up human behavior. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Somebody has, they get on the phone and the guard is up and your job is to bring that guard down. And, if you end up after 5 minutes of getting on the phone, you're talking shop, that's the goal, right? One in which you're both going back and forth, you're adding value, you're getting value in return, you're adding, the customer is giving you more information, which makes your approach a lot stronger, and all of a sudden you're in business because you're not selling, you're advising, you're conversing. You see what I mean?
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that to sort of bring this to conclusion, I think there's two major gaps here. One is that the process itself is both not being well defined or followed, and B, once you get a rep on the phone and the rep is bringing navigating that deal to conclusion, the rep is not equipped with all the story points and all the sort of all the frames that he needs to use to be able to really get the best out of that conversation with the customer. And I think both are sort of large gaps. We're only dealing with the process gap, but the training gap is something that we're always thinking about because we have to deal with that in our own environment.
Right.
But we see it across the board. We have 1,500 customers, so every time we talk to one, we get to catalog all their pains, and we're seeing a lot of that.
And so, based on that, what are you seeing as their primary pains? Even using your system, the
one that we solve, the one that we come in sort of ready to rock is that, and actually there was a study that I read that came from McKinsey a while ago, that there's sort of two conclusions. One is that only 10% of the people getting trained are actually seeing value for the training and sort of getting real return from training. And the second piece is that even after you get the training, very few people actually follow it. So you come, you're brand new VP of sales, you come into a shop and you're like, all right, we need X, Y, or Z training. So you bring in the trainer, you get everybody on the same page, you get all the playbooks, people leave, and then you send your reps back to work. And there is no training, drilling, and ways to make sure that the motions that you set in play, that you want to set in place are there, followed, and respected, along with all the different measuring mechanisms to make sure that you have proper inspection throughout the process. So when we sell against, it's exactly that. When we come into a shop, they all have a process. Is the process followed? 99% of the time is no.
You said 99% of the time is no.
No, yeah.
And well, that's an interesting question in itself. Is you know?
Let me tell you why the process is followed by only a handful of people, and even those are not. Nobody knows whether the process is even working or not. So the longevity of the process that was in play, that was set in place, usually diminishes over time.
Right.
And given the churn, et cetera, that you have in sales teams, give it a year or two, and then the process is unrecognizable. Yet at the highest levels, people think that they do have a process. So all we do in the first, for most of our sales engagements is just make sure that the process is being followed and measured. And that alone, gives you the first bump in ROI from outreach. So that is mostly our bread and butter, is making sure that your process is being followed and that you measure what the result of that is. And even in some instances, we come in and people have, heavy email, heavy, unpersonalized email or heavy calling, and it's the wrong process for the audience, right? So, the moment you measure it, it becomes obvious right now that compared to, your peers, you're not getting the results that you should be getting, and you need to tweak it.
So here's an interesting question, I guess, along those lines, and this is something I hear quite a bit from executives that are looking at hiring and so on, is and this is this choice, I'm interested to get your opinion on this, is okay, you've got a process. I mean, do you hire people that fit the process and will work the process as opposed to, even if they're not necessarily the A players, or would you reach out maybe to get that maverick A player who maybe won't adhere to the process, but might still perform at a certain level? I mean, it seems like that's a trade-off a lot of people are sort of looking at making.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it really depends on the type of business you're in, I think. So the obvious answer is, of course, you're gonna, the process should make the team. The process should people should follow the process, and that makes for a more scalable business, right? So when that means that you're less your risk is less defined by the type of people that come in. People may come and go, but if you have a process that can take an above average person and turn them into a powerhouse salesperson, and it can do it consistently, then you have longevity in your process and prosperity in the business.
Yeah, I mean, I call that the Bill Belichick method. I mean, he's notorious for having a great process, but he doesn't go by the expense of free agents. He gets people that fit the slots and the roles they have. That's
exactly right. I mean, one of my favorite books is the score that takes care of itself. And in that book,
Bill Walsh, right?
Bill Walsh talks about the standard of performance, and everybody has a standard of performance, and the standard of performance is it gives you the ability to sort of bring anybody in who adheres to the standard of performance, and then you get production out of the person, and it's very repeatable. And I think this is especially acute in SaaS businesses, because in SaaS businesses, what you're buying as an investor, it's not so much the disruption in the software world, blah blah blah. What you're getting is recurring revenue. That's what you pay for. So as a recurring revenue machine, anybody in the SaaS world has to be able to create a repeatable process for sales. Because nobody in the SaaS world buys a company that has lumpy or that has very lumpy growth, or that growth is very susceptible to the type of salesperson or the vintage or the ability of a particular salesperson. And one of the things that as a venture funded business, when we went for fundraising last time, one of the areas where VCs like to dig deep is how much of your revenue is driven by one or two superstar individuals versus is this a process that is repeatable, and you have quota taming across the board, et cetera. And if you look at the latest surveys coming from both CSO and Accenture, et cetera, what you're seeing is quota attainment is going, has been dropping,
yes,
consistently. Now to the point that we're back to where we were in 2006 in terms of the percentage of people attaining quota.
Well, and that raises an interesting question. One I've asked more than one guest is, okay, well, we're in this, I'll say, quote unquote, golden age of sales, given the explosion onto the scene of all these great sales technologies. And yet what we're seeing is that, performance, at least on some measures, and whether they're 100% accurate or not is sort of beyond the point. If we look at them as trends in terms of CSO insights, we look at Forrester, their research that said that the close rate for B2B sales is dropping. It has dropped consistently over the last 5 years. What's happening? I mean, is this just an inflection point? We're learning how to use these technologies, or are they really not helping?
No. So it's interesting you say that. So if you look at the CSO numbers and sort of go one level deep from the obvious metrics, what you're seeing is that this is happening with inverse relationship with CRM adoption. So all these shops that are underperforming have 85% and above CRM adoption. So it's either non-correlated or inversely correlated, meaning rolling out CRM is doing nothing to your quota attainment ability. So then the next question is, so what is it related to? Like, what is actually causing it? And one of the areas where CSO digs a little deeper is, do you follow your own process? And this gets back to my previous point. And what you're seeing is that, those who follow their process have, 60% of above chances of quota attainment. Whereas those who don't, which is, the midsection and sort of the average performers and the low performers, those who have less than 50% adoption of their own process actually tend to miss quota more often. So the quick fix for the majority of these shops is just following their own process. And it sort of correlates nicely to the study that McKinsey did, and a few articles that I read on HBR, that the ability, once you follow your process, you will be able to measure it. Once you're able to measure, you will be able to optimize it. But most people don't even follow their own process. And the problem is that it's because it's administratively heavy. A lot of these playbooks, require a lot of human interaction with the CRM. And the CRM, frankly, was designed for, the value of the CRM is the value the human gives it to the CRM. Meaning if the human is not manually inputting all this information into the CRM, the value of CRM goes, diminishes quickly. So this is what you see, in a land in which, CRM adoption is increasing, quota attainment is actually decreasing. It's because the process is not being followed, and B, the process is in itself very burdensome to the rep.
Well, it'd be really interesting to look at those figures sliced with, let's say, those that are using, a tool like Outreach.io, for instance, because to me, I think one of the genius of what Salesforce has done is said, yes, we want, an Outreach.io because in one respect, it is the easiest way to get data into Salesforce.
That's exactly right.
I mean, so it seemed like a fairly clever move on their part to say, look, unless we want to fundamentally rejigger our architecture, let's get all these other tools that are out there that make it easier to get data into our system.
That's exactly right. Funny you mentioned that, because one of the reasons our customers are buying Outreach is because it makes the Salesforce investment work.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's interesting when you think about the fallacy of the sunk cost.
Yes,
is that it exists, but nobody wants to be the one who sunk it. You see what I mean? So nobody's going to say, this cost is sunk, let's move on. I mean, that's a fine economic argument, but it doesn't make any sense at the human level. You see what I mean?
Well, so but that's interesting you bring that up, because outside of sales infrastructure you're talking about, I mean, the sunk cost dilemma in sales itself is, why are our pipelines so full of prospects that are never going to close?
Yeah,
I mean, because of that whole sunk cost dilemma.
Exactly. So I mean, the behavior is perverse across the board. But unless you have a tool, so when we come in and sell Outreach, Outreach makes the first investment, it validates the first investment because it now keeps the CRM clean and puts all the information that needs to be there, et cetera. But in the sense of in the pipeline, it allows you to sort of work on the areas of the pipe that are actually are going to pay out. And put in the activity and sort of put in the activity. Mm-hmm. Now, the cleaning out the pipeline and sort of dispensing with opportunities that are not going to close or are going nowhere. That's a great topic, especially around one of the biggest pet peeves we get from sales VPs is that to really every time you're trying to forecast opportunity closing. You look at the opportunity pipeline, and there's a lot of 90%. There's a lot of things that are just going to close or about to close. We're in final talks, etc. But if you correlate that to the activity, very little is happening. So you see a lot of reps committing opportunities that haven't had activity in days or even weeks. And if you even go down one level, what you're seeing is activities not happening with the right people, right?
Sure.
So if you're at a 90% opportunity and you haven't really engaged, say, procurement, you're not closing that opportunity in the next 2 weeks.
No.
You see that?
Oh, no, absolutely. We could have a whole, we'll do this actually, a whole separate show on forecasting because, don't get me started. We don't have time today, but it's broken.
What you just said is everybody's hot button. Like I haven't met a sales VP in which if I don't press that, I don't get a good 15-minute rant about
Sure.
what's happening, etc.
Well, I mean, and I wrote about this in my last book is sort of the fallacy of forecasting with CRMs is that they're all stage based, and that just by virtue of submitting a proposal, let's say if that suddenly gives you a 75% chance of winning.
Exactly.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if there are 4 other competitors on the deal. Well, mathematically, you can't all have a 75% chance of winning just because you all submitted a proposal.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll come back to that one. And so Manny, we're moving to the last segment of the show where I've got some standard questions I ask all my guests. And the first one's a hypothetical scenario where you've just been hired as VP of sales to do a sales turnaround at a company whose sales have stalled out. CEOs anxious, like yourself, anxious to get things back on track. So if you were in that role, what are the 2 things that you could do your first week on the job that could have the biggest impact?
It's funny you mentioned that because we touched on this just a minute ago, is that I would look at your sales playbook and I would make sure that the reps are following the playbook and that my instrumentation that I got from my sales operation actually reflects what people are supposed to be doing as part of the playbook.
Okay.
And that's step number 1. Then of course, then you move down to, looking at rep performance versus, what you expect out of the rep. And then you look at, the rep performance versus, peer groups, in your market. Then after that, you look at sort of, a stage, for each stage of the pipeline, you sort of look at, time spent in each stage and, sort of conversion rates and so on and so forth to make sure that, your story matches the business that you're trying to sell or pitch and the audience you're going after.
Okay.
So I mean that's my.
That'd be good. That's a good start.
90-day plan.
Okay, excellent. Like it. So some rapid fire questions for you. Then the first one is when you, Manny, are out selling your services, what's your most powerful sales attribute?
That I'm really good at getting somebody to sort of talk shop with me very quickly.
All right. Who's your sales role model?
There's a few. I love Mike Weinberg.
Mm-hmm.
His book was very influential into me, growing as a salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
I love. There's I recently came from from a Tony Robbins
Right.
What is it called event, and the stuff that I learned there really helps me sort of take all the conversation and set a high frame and so forth.
Okay,
so those 2.
Excellent. So what's one book you think every salesperson should read?
Oh, by far, my Weinberg's
New Sales Simplified.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
If you read nothing else, read that.
That's a good book.
And your book.
Oh, which one?
Amp Up Your Sales.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. And all right, last question for you. What music is on your playlist?
Depends on what I'm trying to get done. So if I'm just cranking, and I'm just heads down, Sex Pistols is my go-to.
Classic. Okay. Like it. Good. Yeah, I think you may be the first one out of that's answered the Sex Pistols. That's a good one. All right. Well, I mean, people don't listen to as much. Good stuff. All right.
I know.
Manny, I want to thank you for being on the show today, and tell folks how they can find out more about Outreach or connect with you.
Yeah, please go to outreach.io or just email me directly at manny@outreach.io.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks again. And remember, friends, thank you for taking the time to join us today. And remember, make it part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. Easy way to do that, take a minute, subscribe to this podcast, Accelerate. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Manny Medina, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.